it's all nice, right? Features and Gaelyk makes it easy to develop applications on Google App Engine. But basically, how do I test it? I personally believe that nowadays any decent web framework should come with a way of testing the applications you write in it. So how is Gaelyk doing in this area? Apparently not so bad. So let's first have a look at unit testing. So there is a library called gaelyk-spock helpers, which contains some base Spock specifications you can use to test your groovlets and URL mappings. Yeah, it was created by Marco Vermeulen, and basically what it does, it's in those base specifications, it mocks out Google App Engine services using App Engine testing module provided by Google, and where those services, those mocks are unavailable or are simply just more convenient to use Spock mocks, it's using Spock mocks. So we have three base specification: Gaelyk unit spec for testing groovelets, conventional Gaelyk unit spec, which basically is like Gaelyk unit spec with the difference that it determines which groovlet we are testing in a given specification based on conventions and naming. And there is also Gaelyk routing spec, which, as name suggests, can be used for testing your routing scripts. A really simple example of a groovelet. So it takes a request parameter called name, it builds a string out of it. It assigns it to a hello attribute on the request. That's basically the way you pass data from groovelet to templates in Gaelyk. And at the end, we are forwarding to render a hello template. And when it comes to testing, as I said, we can use Gaelyk unit spec. In the setup method, we tell the test which groovelet we are actually testing. And over here, that's gonna be, probably cannot see the bottom line of the code, which is the most important part. Yeah, okay. So in the given block, we can see how we can set request parameters in our test. In when block, we can see how we can execute the groovelet under test. And in the then block, where we verify if the code works as we expect to, we are checking that the request attribute hello was actually set to the value we were expecting it to be set. The same example, but using conventional Gaelyk unit spec. So we don't have to specify which groovelet we are testing, because based on the name basic groovelet spec, it knows that it's going to test basic groovelet. And thanks to that, we have a little bit more space in the slide, so you can see how we can test forwarding. Let's move. Oh yeah, one more thing. So those are just really basic, simple examples, and you can do much more. You can basically modify and interact with the binding of the groovelet under test. You can verify interactions between your groovelet and Google App Engine services, and a thing that you would probably use most often is the interactions between the groovelet and data store. And if you are really mental, you can even check what has been logged and assert against that as well. So let's move on to testing routes. We have two simple routes here. Well, actually, the first one is simple. The second one is a bit more complex. So we are saying that when we receive a get call to /about, we should forward to the about template. And the second one is using path variables. So basically the @number part in the URL, and we are using that path variable value in our redirect, and we are also we have also specified validate closure, which basically means that if the closure returns false, the route will never match. So over here again, we specify which groovelet we are testing. Sorry, not groovelet. I meant root script. Basically, in Gaelyk, You can have multiple root scripts. People usually have one, but you still need to specify which one we are testing because of the possibility to have multiple scripts. And how we are testing about root. So using the Spock 0.7 needs new with method, we can say that when we do a request to a get request to /about, the roots should match, and we should be forwarded to about template. The more complex example, if we pass, if we send a request to /number/nan, which basically is not a number, then the root will not match, and just saying that not post because of how the method, how the as Boolean method of those roots is implemented, it's expressive enough to know that the root will not match. When it comes to testing patch variables, so we can see how they can be asserted. We are asserting that the variables.number is 1, 2, 3, and we can also test our destination URL with the path variable value injected into it. Basically, all the functionality of Gaelyk roots routing is supported. So you can test email and Jabber roots. You can verify a root caching if you have it specified in your routing. You can also test roots with single and double star wildcards. So that was a quick view on unit testing, but what can we do when we want to check the whole stack, right? So we probably will have some JavaScript in our application. We are rendering some templates, and basically we at least want a bit of smoke test around integration of it all, and seeing that the JavaScript plays well with our backend, and so on, so on. We basically cannot test template outputs using unit testing, so it's good to have functional tests, as I said. And functional tests are basically good for everything you're not able to unit test. So nowadays, I think most of the people who develop Gaelyk applications would use Gradle to build their applications. And in Gradle, you've got Gradle Gaelyk plugin to build that you can use to build Gaelyk applications. And that plugin in turn is using the Google App Engine plugin, Gradle Google App Engine plugin, which comes now with this neat task, Google GAE Functional Test, which basically starts up a development instance of Google App Engine locally, and then runs all the tests from functional test source set against that instance. So because we are here Groovy enthusiasts, I believe that when we hear functional testing, we think of JEP. Apart from that, when functionally testing Gaelyk applications, we can also use Gaelyk Remote control, which is used to basically execute arbitrary code in a remote JVM. I will explain in a while why it's important. And there's also Gaelyk Functional Test Tools, which is just a set of helpers that make it easier to perform common tasks in your functional tests when it comes to testing Gaelyk applications. So JEP is a Groovy browser automation solution based on WebDriver. And the nice thing about it is that all the heavy lifting, driving the browser itself, is done by WebDriver, and whatever is supported by WebDriver is also supported by Groovy. By JEP, because if something isn't, you can always go down, access the WebDriver, and call the methods on it. Apart from that, JEP gives you jQuery-like content selection to make your selectors more concise and the code around selection of DOM elements more concise. And it also comes with a page object pattern, which is really good when it comes to separation your test from your DOM, in a sense that you've got just an additional layer over there that shields your test from changes in your DOM. So basically, when your DOM structure changes, you change your page objects, and your or at least in theory, your test should stay intact. And there are many many adapters for testing when it comes to JEP, but we will use Spock because it's the grooviest solution in that scene. So Gaelyk Remote Control, we have to remember that the development instance, development server, which we are testing against, is in a different JVM from our from our tests. So basically, we need a way to communicate between our tests and that JVM. And what Gaelyk Remote Control does is just it allows you to send an arbitrary code from your test to the development server. And this is important because quite often in your functional test you will want to set up a database state or change the state of the application under test. And this is all possible thanks to Gaelyk Remote Control, which is basically a Gaelyk compatible version of Groovy Remote Control. And some of you might have heard about Groovy Remote Control through writing some tests, functional tests for Grails, because there's also a Grails plugin available for that. And the nice thing is, because when you send that arbitrary code, which basically that code is a closure, in Grails plugin, in the context of that closure, there is Grails application and main context of the application available. In the same way, when you use Gaelyk Remote Control in your closures that you are sending over to the server, you have access to all the Google App Engine services that are also available in your groovlets, which helps a lot when you have to bootstrap some data, or you want to do some kind of gray box testing where you don't verify the result of your test through the UI, but you just go directly to the application and check the state of the application. As I said, setting up data in the data store is quite often useful in your functional test. So Gaelyk Functional Tools come with a simple DSL to do it. It also has a Spock extension that allows you to simply annotate your Spock test methods, which in turn will clean the data store after the test has executed. And there's also a one-liner for logging into your Gaelyk applications if you are using the default Google App Engine authentication mechanism. So that will be it for the introduction, and now I'm gonna move on to a live demo. I will probably have to set it all up so that you can see the code. So it's gonna probably take a while. Start with our build of Cradle. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know that it was going to take 20 minutes, right? Okay, I will. So anyway, as I said, we are using Gradle Gaelyk plugin to develop our application. I will also show you some dependencies that we have over here. Just make sure that you see the whole thing. It won't help much. Okay. Yeah, so we have Gaelyk Functional Test Data Store Builder for the data bootstrap DSL I told you about. We've got Gaelyk Remote over here. We are using gaelyk-spock as well as Gaelyk Functional Tests over here. What else should I show you? Okay, so let's go to our specification. Or maybe before I start, I'll show you the application. It's really simple. Currently, you can just log in using the default Google App Engine authentication mechanism, and it just says that you have no to-dos yet. So what we're going to do, we will implement a new feature which will allow us to post new to-dos to the application. Sorry. As I told you before, we already have some tests over here. And over here we can see how the modifies data store annotation is used, which basically says that this test modifies data store and please clean up after the execution of that test has finished. We are simply logging into the application first. This is provided via the login category, which comes from Gaelyk Functional Test Tools. We also have a data setup category over here, which makes setting up data really easy using this simple DSL. We are just saying we are creating two entities of kinds to do over here, with each one of them with different text, and they all belong to the same user. Sorry, no, the first two belong to the same user, and third one belongs to somebody else. Next thing, let's have a quick look at what we have in our root spec. Maybe the roots first. So it's really simple. Just whatever hits the application is redirected to our main groovelet, and we have tests for that. It looks exactly the same as I showed you on the slides. And we also have a test for our main groovelet, which basically tests that if a user is logged in. So this is how we mock a logged in user in our unit tests. If a user is logged in, then we see different information. And also the second test is if there is any data in the data store. We are setting the data up here. We see those that data displayed in the UI. Okay, so let's start with a functional test first. So let's say that user adds a to-do. Let's steal some code from here. Right. Okay. So we have our setup. So we set up some data in the data store. We log in. We go to to-dos page, and then we want to set the text of our new to-do. So basically, to do it, we need some kind of form. I'm going to cheat a bit and steal it from here, because if you remember, there is no form over here yet. So so we need to add it first. Let's open here. So now we have the markup, but we also have to specify the content of that markup in our page, which is the page object model I told you about. So when we have a look at the markup, we just added an input with name text. So let's select it. So new to do will be an input with name text, and there's also a button that will allow us to submit the new to do. So let's add that as well. So we can basically, because it's just the next element in DOM, so let's use next method. You might know from jQuery. It's really similar. It's not exactly the same as in jQuery, but the API is really similar. So people who know jQuery will catch up with JEP quite quickly. So now we have our content specified, and going back to the test, we are saying that the text of our new to do will be our new to do. And then we're going to click on submit new to do. Oh, should be when block, of course, instead of then block. And now in a then block, we will verify that text of our to-dos is first and second. Those are to-dos that are coming from our Bootstrap data. And at the end, we will also see our new to-do, right? Okay, so let's run it. You probably won't be able to see much. I'm going to try to move the browser into a position where it will be visible for you. Yeah, so we ended up with a 404. And why is that? This is simply because we have no root for where the form is being submitted to. So the next step would be to add that root. But before we do it, we should write a test for it, right? So a test for add to do root. And we are expecting that a post to... You're struggling a lot? A post to... going to use the get method from Spock 0.7 again. A post to /to-do/add should match. Why is that? Okay, doesn't like it. Oh, cheers. Yeah. Also, why is IDEA not auto-completing it for me? Okay, yeah. So we are saying that it matches. It should forward also to our new groovlet, which we will create in a second. Let's put it in a new to-do package, and let's call it simply add. Right. Let's rerun our test. Let's run our test for the first time. And yeah, we can see that the root in line 23, which is over here, that the root doesn't match. So let's add a new entry to routing. We are posting to do add, and we should forward to ggx to do and add.groovy. Right, let's rerun the test. Should be all green now. Yes, it is. Great. So we now have a functional test. We have a routing test with the root implemented, but we still have no groovelet that would handle our request. So let's add a new groovelet. Sorry. Let's define the package which it is in. Okay, and now we need to create a new unit test. Sorry. It's going to be called add spec. We will use the conventional base spec. And thanks to putting the test in the same package as the groovelets and calling it add spec, it's going to know which groovelet we are testing. So again, user adds to do. In a given block, we have to specify what user is currently logged in, because we will also want to verify that the newly created to-do saved in the database is assigned to that user. So let's put a user variable in the binding of our groovelet under test. Okay, and we don't really care about email and also out domain, because we won't be storing that. We will be only storing the user ID. And the other thing is the text of the to-do we are passing from our form. So request parameter called text will be my new to-do, right? So we have our setup. Then in when block, we will execute the groovlet under test. And we want to verify. So we can in those unit tests we can easily query the database. So let's select the to-do we've just created by saying data store, which is the Google App Engine data store available, mocked Google App Engine data store available in your unit tests. We will use the nice DSL that Gaelyk provides for querying data store. So we can simply say select single from to-do. A little bit of groovy magic here. And we expect the to-do to have the property text set to my new to-do. And we are also expecting the user ID property of that domain object to be 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe. Is this the thing I said? Yeah. Okay. So we have the test written down. Let's see it fail. So we have a failure as expected. Over here we can see that there is no text property on a null object. In line 21, let's go to line 21 then. And basically we can see that in line 21, we are trying to get the property of the element. So basically it means that there was no new element in the data store, which is as expected because we haven't implemented anything yet. So let's first build the properties of our new entity. So from params, oh, thanks. From params, we can whitelist the text only, so that if somebody makes some malicious request to that URL, nothing will happen because we will only take the text from there. And we also want to set the user ID property. Can you still see it? Yes, great. So yeah, we are taking the user available in the binding of the groovlet, and we are extracting the user ID from it and setting it as a property of our new entity. So let's create a new entity of kind to do. Right? That's if we have a look at, it doesn't understand that yet. Okay. If we have a look at it, the first parameter to entity constructor is the kind. And again, a little bit of Gaelyk magic. We can simply say assign all the properties to the entity. And at the end, we should also remember to save that new entity we have created. So let's run the test again. Okay, it's green as expected now because we have implemented everything. But there is one more thing. We have to in our Groovlet, we have to remember to go back to the page that renders all of our to-dos, and this is done by the main Groovlet. So in our spec, we also want to verify that at the end we are forwarded to ggx/todo/ no, yeah, the name of the application /todo. No, without that. I think it's here. Is it? Let's check. ggx, yeah, the main. Okay. So now, again, we are expecting the test to fail because we are not forwarding yet in the Groovlet. Yeah. That's really, oh, that's not what I wanted actually, because I don't want to check the entity anymore. I want to check the groovelet under test. Let's rerun it. Cool, we are not forwarding anywhere, so that's the error we were expecting. So let's forward then. And let's rerun the test. And it nicely passes. So we started with a functional test, which failed in the beginning. We then moved on to implement our new first test and then implement our new routes. And now we are expecting our first functional test we wrote to pass. The only thing is that I forgot to put the modifies data store annotation on it. So the first time I'm going to run it now, it's going to fail because the data store will be polluted. But the second time I will run it, it will pass. At least that's what I expect. Let's see if I'm wrong here or not. Yeah, there's too much to-dos. As you saw, there was like 5 of them instead of 3 because of what I told you. But to make it more visible, I'm going to put a breakpoint over here when I run it for the second time. Maybe I should put a breakpoint over here as well, so that that's not here yet. So that I can set the move the browser to the center of the screen so that you can see the whole test. Okay. Right. And let's continue with the test. Right. So now we can see that our to-do was added. And the test is green. So hey, we have just test-driven a new feature in our simple to-do application. Cheers. I knew it's gonna happen. Told you. Cheers, Anders. So yeah, more or less you can see it. So when I started working on JEP, I was pretty amazed how nice the setup of tests when it comes to testing JEP core is. Everything is nicely set up. So if you add a new feature, it's really easy to start testing it, and so on. So that's what Luke Daly, who is the creator of JEP, told me back then, and I believe that after all the tools I showed you today, you will no longer have any excuses not to test your Gaelyk applications if you write any. Hopefully you will do. ID support for what? So as you could see, there's not much auto-completion going on, which is because I think groovlets are pretty dynamic, and you've got binding. You are modifying binding and just adding more and more functions to the Google App Engine services. There is a DSL descriptor that ships together with Gaelyk, but to be honest, it's both for Eclipse and for IDEA. But to be honest, I never really cared about using it. I don't know. I'm kind of used after working with JEP for a while that that IDEA doesn't complete because there's so much magic going on, thanks to which your test can be concise and simple that you just don't get auto completion. It's just you get something, you lose something, in my opinion. So yeah, but there were some people who were suggesting we could do something about it as long as it comes for JEP, but it's really hard because there's so much dynamic things going on, and it's really hard for IDE to complete that stuff. One thing, I don't know if you have noticed, but when it comes to IDE support, I was actually surprised the other day when I was rehearsing this talk that IDEA now understands JEP content definitions. You can see over here that it knows what new to do is, that it's a result from from other content definition, and it then auto-completes. It knows that it returns that this new to do content definition returns a navigator, and then you have all the methods available on the navigator for you. So a little bit of links. So gaelyk-spock helpers, the library that you can use for unit testing Gaelyk applications, is available from not so long ago created Gaelyk organization on GitHub. Gaelyk Remote and Gaelyk Functional Test Tools are available under my ID. There's quite a lot of documentation on both of those tools, so you will know how to set it up and how to use it. And you should probably also visit my blog. I will post those slides and the fully implemented test application I showed you, so you can check it out and you can play with it if you want. Are there any questions? So if there are no questions, thank you very much.